Hi, welcome back for another episode of Renaissance Thrift, or Thrift Renaissance, whatever you want to call it. We are making clothing for Renaissance fairs or Shakespeare productions or anything else you like. That's not, strictly speaking, reenactment garb. This is stuff that we are making that's affordable, easy to make, and we're making out of things that we've got at the thrift store. Today we're looking at thrift store doublets. A doublet is pretty expensive to get and pretty time consuming to make if you don't have some good jacket making skills. So the way we're going to do it is you would take your intended victims, those that you are going to put them on, and find out what the equivalent women's jacket size is that they would wear. Why women's jacket? That's because the fabrics and the colors, the variety that you're going to find, is a lot more like the way that they would have dressed than the much more subdued tones that people use nowadays for men's jackets. So we're looking at women's jackets, but because we're looking at women's jackets, we don't want them to be too pleated. We don't want the pleats that come in from the side in this area to help create the bust, or it's going to look a little funny on the guy. We want it to fit well, so we're looking for jackets that have a really plain cut to them. Preferably not a whole bunch of buttons. A tab cut collar is fine. And what we're going to do is, and as I've started to on this one, is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take off the arms. In this case, you take off the stitching up to about here on both sides, and then you cut outwards to create the shape of the little cap that they have on them. The doublets have those. Then, the collar is really going to be simple, because you can take a regular collar and just fold it in, and it makes a stand-up collar. That's pretty correct. Now, you'll see that this has these little pieces here, these little pleats that are sewn in. There's no point in removing them. In a darker fabric, they won't show up as much. If they really bother you, then I would run a piece of trim down either side of the garment there and cover them up. But in most cases, you can really barely see them in a theatrical production. There's no way. Any sort of theatrical thing, people are going to be drawn to putting their attention on the person actually doing the performing. They're not going to be sitting there staring at their outfit unless the person's really screwing up and boring them. Now you can use ones which have, I've taken off the buttons, there's great big buttons on them. I can fold back, I'll show this to you when it's done, fold back this piece in the front on either side, just underneath the lapel, and use that to, number one, get rid of those buttonholes, and number two, that will give me more reinforcement for putting in grommets in order to do a laced front, or I put toggle fasteners in there, depending on how much the width of the jacket matches the width of the billman you're putting it on. The other thing you're going to do, and I hope you can see it from there, is that you'll see I've cut the bottom off of it. Ones without slash pockets or ones with patch pockets that you can just remove are the easiest way to do this. But if it even has a slash pocket, a man's doublet in period is actually cut at the natural waistline, not at the belt line, not way down here. It's cut higher than we would do it, across the middle of the back at the waistline, over to the hips, and then it typically comes downward, sort of following that line guys have in Calvin Klein ads. There's a little muscle line there. That's pretty much what they're imitating. I don't know why. Anyway, that's what you do, and this gives you this odd-shaped piece. This piece from the back, a little bit of debris from the pockets, and then this piece in the front. And what we're going to do, and I'll show you that, is going to take off just this bottom strip, about that much of it, and re-sew it back onto the bottom, and that will give the peplum piece that's usually used as sort of a finish and a slight flare at the bottom of the doublet. There's usually a seam there. If you have a very sort of flare, fashionable, more high fashion look woman's coat, it may actually have enough flare just there at the hip area that you could cut it and just put a piece of trim or just a seam line. I mean, just put a line of stitching so it looks like it's attached. It depends on how much of a hurry you're in and how much effort you have to put it on this. Because quite honestly, if I was in a hurry, this is just removal. I could throw this on someone and put them on stage and I'd do it. Dare me. But anyway, that's it today. I will show how these are made up later, except that you can do a lot of different types of things. This is a slightly more of a coat-like cut jacket. It's a little bit heavier. It's a really nice wool. It would cost me a fortune to buy the wool for this, but a mostly made doublet cost me about $6-7. And that already has a nice stitching line on it, a decorative line. This one, a much more plain item. But again, you can see the plainness is what makes it convert nicely. And this one is, again, it's a really nice, really heavy-duty wool on that. Trying to find some of this type of wool in the shops, not always can be found, especially off-season. And this one's a linen, so we'll make a lighter outfit. And this one I'm doing something a little different. I've opened the bottom to here. I've cut off the bottom, but I left the top part of the sleeve on because I'm going to imitate a detachable sleeve without the pain of having to have a separate piece. I'm going to actually, and you really would make yourself a big favor if this is a costume piece, is that you just cut off the tail, you use part of the fabric for the bottom, and you don't have to put that little peplum strip at the bottom. You could just finish this and have someone wear it. But then I will also have enough fabric left, because the back, what I've removed is fairly substantial, to create little caps that will hide the fact that the top of the sleeve is not detached. It's actually still part of the garment. And that is how I will make a sleeve-inclusive garment. And these other ones are just going to be worn as a lot of times they were without the sleeves. All right, we're going to finish up the jackets from the thrift store that have been changed into doublets. Once you've done the cuts that I mentioned before, well, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take from the part that you've removed off the bottom of the jacket, you're going to cut 2.5 inches up from the bottom edge. You're going to remove that piece, and we're going to reuse that hem and the trimming that was done there in order to put the peplum on. You don't have to put a peplum on, but it will help reinforce the edge of the jacket. It's a common decoration for the period, so that's what we've done here. I also took it and broke it about mid-hip, so right underneath the underarm, because in the time they would have broke them there so that they could wear a sword, so they had more freedom of movement to use a horse, things of that nature. So usually you do see them broken at the side, and that's what I've done here. It does not have to run all the way out to the edge. I probably should have cut it a little closer. Speaking of cutting, we're going to get to the arms. And I would probably, on this one, I'll probably actually even make this revision, is cut this arm up a slightly higher arc. It turns out that it is restricting his movement a little bit wearing the jacket now. So you can either start the cap up a little higher or cut it a little sharper so you don't have quite as much overhang over the top of the shoulder. It does also have a double fold tape has been used to finish the bottom edge of the armhole. Then to finish the front edge, you put the jacket on the wear and you cross it over the front because your button-up jackets are made to cross. Period doublets would have been made to pretty much butt end, to just meet in the middle. So in order to get that point, easiest way to do it is to put the jacket on one way, then lap it the other way, and mark that outside edge. Between that outside edge that you've marked and the edge of the garment in the middle is the butting point, is in there. So you go ahead, you find that location, you can try a couple different pinnings. Then I want you to add about 3/4 of an inch to either side. Why? Because depending on what they're wearing underneath and giving some freedom of movement, it's not meant to be a corset. So you're going to want to have a little bit of ease in there. And that's how you will finish the front. The good part is that when you don't cut it off, when you fold it back around and sew it, just blind stitch it down there, what that's going to give you is extra reinforcement so that your fasteners in the front, whether you're using latches, whether you're using frogs like these, whether you're using eyelets, whether you're using some of these little metal hooks, whatever you have handy to make the front closure, When you do that, you don't want it to start pulling and deforming. You don't want gaposis along here other than what you're allowing for decorative purposes to show the shirt underneath. You want it to have perhaps a gap. You don't want it to have a scallop. So we're trying to alleviate some of that. We're not going to bother putting boning in here. We can just flip this already interfaced front edge, and it will give us the reinforcement that we need there for a pretty frequent amount of wear. This will last a long time like that. Just to point out the differences is that you do have, this is a store-made outfit. It's a very beautiful thing. That's store-made. It's been made online by a professional company. It's very nice. It will cost you, depending on the fabric and who makes it, between $70 and $180. It's nice. It's a beautiful garment. This is going to cost you about $20, and a lot of that's the accessories. This was a $6 or $7 thrift jacket, to which has been added the edging tape as well as accessories for fasteners. That's it. We'll get into shirts and pants later on.